In this video, we're going to discuss chemical safety in the detail shop, recognizing potentially hazardous chemicals frequently used by detailers and how to protect yourself. So why address chemicals in the detail shop in wash bay? Often these chemicals are going to be some of the most hazardous in the entire dealership. They may appear to be harmless, or you may have used them before, or you may have used a version that you can find on a retail store shelf, but these are not the same. These are industrial strength chemicals. So there's a lot of complacency that happens in detail shops because of this. There's also a wide range of safety hazards related to detail chemicals that need to be addressed. Often they're going to be harmful to your health. More often they're going to be caustic to the skin or eyes, and sometimes they'll be flammable. So there are a few ways that you can be exposed to a chemical. You can absorb it through your skin or eyes, which is most likely in a detail shop because you're in close quarters with that chemical. Ingestion, which is accidental eating or drinking of a chemical. Inhalation, which is breathing it in. In this case, in a detail shop, you could inhale fumes from a certain chemical that you're using. And the last way is injection, which in an industrial setting, this means more of a jet propulsion or pneumatic type injection where a chemical gets forced into your skin. Very serious when it happens, but it's not likely in a detail shop. To protect yourself from these chemicals in the detail shop, there are a few items that you need to familiarize yourself with. Number one, read the chemical container label for each chemical that you use. These labels are going to have hazard statements that tell you what's bad about the chemical and why, and how to protect yourself. You also need to know where your company keeps the safety data sheets. If you don't know where those are, please ask your supervisor. These are a tool for a hazard communication, a document that tells you everything you could possibly need to know about that chemical. And I strongly recommend you read the safety data sheets for the chemicals that you use on a daily basis. You also need to know the location of all the emergency equipment in the dealership, particularly the eye wash station, the first aid kit, and where the fire extinguishers are. It's important to understand that no chemicals are made in the exact same way with the exact same concentrations, though they can be similar. That's why it's important for you to read those safety data sheets and read those container labels to have a good understanding of what it is you're working with. But I've compiled a list here of common things that you'll find in a detail shop and what the hazards associated with those are. Number one is wheel acids. Those will contain hydrofluoric acid sometimes. In a lot of cases, a lot of dealerships have phased those out because they are so harmful. They are extremely caustic to the skin and eyes, and they also have a slew of health hazards associated, which can cause inpatient hospitalizations and even fatalities. I'll expand on this here shortly. Gloss protective agents, Teflons and fluoropolymers, can cause cancer. Car wash soaps, especially in their concentrated form, can cause severe damage to the skin and eyes because of the phosphates. Windshield washer fluid contains methanol, which is extremely flammable in its concentrated state, and also can cause renal damage or kidney damage from prolonged or repeated exposure. All-purpose cleaners and degreasers have a slew of hazards associated with them, particularly they are harmful to the skin, and they do have some health hazards involved with them. And then you'll sometimes find powerful solvents in detail shops. Often these are going to be flammable solvents and do have some other health effects associated with them, such as cancer or organ damage in a variety of different ways. That's why it's also, again, very important that you understand what it is you're working with and how it can hurt you and how to protect yourself. In this video, I really want to drive home the dangers of wheel acids. So we're going to cover that in a little bit more detail here. They are extremely caustic to the skin and eyes, which means it will burn you almost immediately, and it can cause permanent eye damage. If you talk to some older detailers who have been using this stuff for a while, most all of them have a story about a gust of wind coming through and getting exposed. Usually it's in a very diluted form, and they're okay. But they will tell you that this stuff is no joke and it will hurt you very badly. Oftentimes these are going to contain a chemical called hydrofluoric acid, or HF, and it can cause serious or fatal systemic toxicity. Oftentimes, whenever exposed in large amounts, you'll have an inpatient hospitalization in which calcium will sometimes leach from the bones and could very likely lead to a fatality, depending on the circumstances and if you have any pre-existing conditions. So, a few controls on how to control hydrofluoric acid or wheel acid in general. We want to remove any hydrofluoric acid containing wheel acid from the site when possible. To completely eliminate the hazard would be ideal. But if we can't, we definitely want to avoid use whenever possible and use it sparingly if you're required to. Eye protection is always mandatory for any kind of wheel cleaner, but goggles and face shields if it is containing hydrofluoric acid. Chemical resistant gloves, a nitrile, natural rubber, neoprene, definitely not a latex, will always be required when using a wheel acid or a wheel cleaner of any sort. Appropriate footwear, no open-toed shoes, no water shoes, anything like that where it can leach through. No part of the skin should ever be exposed, especially if you're using hydrofluoric acid containing wheel acid. And you need to make sure all rags in trash are discarded promptly after using this stuff. We don't want somebody else coming and picking it up with their bare hands and getting burned or exposed. You need to talk to your supervisor, particularly if you need clarification on any of the hazards of the chemicals that you use. You need to talk to your supervisor if you need additional eye protection, spectacles or goggles to prevent those splashes of those harmful chemicals from getting in your eyes. But also what happens more often is the punctures, the cuts, and the foreign bodies in the eye. If you need chemical resistant gloves to prevent skin contact from harmful chemicals, aprons if using caustic materials like acid wash, and respirators if the chemical you're using warrants it, like an undercoating, which still happens in a lot of detail shops, or something serious like hydrofluoric acid, in which you'd need that as well. Any other PPE noted on the chemical label or safety data sheet, you need to talk to your supervisor if you need to procure that as well. Some closing thoughts. Detail shops are no place for complacency. These chemicals are serious. They can absolutely put you in the hospital or hurt you very badly, very quickly. You need to ask your supervisor to discuss the hazards associated with the chemicals used and where to get the protective equipment you need. And you need to read the labels and safety data sheets and use that information to protect yourself. Thank you.